Hello, everybody. I see we have about 6 people in the chat, but there seems to be some sort of video issue going on. So if everyone could type their name and company in the chat, because within a week or so, we will send out this video so that you can have it to take a look at. And I'll repeat that in just a minute, but it's right about it's 2:31, so we're gonna get started. Hi, my name is Tandalyn Daniel, and I am your host today. I am with the Georgia Hospitality and Food Service Network. We're an organization that tries to bring great information, education, things that anyone who's operating a food service business would like to know. Today, I am very excited to be discussing grease traps with a very good friend of mine. I've known him for a very long time. His name is Pat Agnew, and he is with Apex Environmental Services. Okay. And Pat, with that, do you want to say anything before we start with the questions and the conversation?
Just that I'm really glad to be here. Hello, everybody, on a very rainy afternoon. I hope everybody is surviving this tropical storm, and I hope you're ready for some riveting information regarding grease traps, because it's such an exciting thing.
And actually, it is grease traps are essential to any food service operations. And so with that, we're going to get started, because I don't think you would be here if you weren't excited in topics like this. So we're going to start with Pat. Pat, what is a grease trap?
Okay, well, that's a pretty common question that I get often, and the answer is a grease trap, in its simplest terms, is a filter. It's a device that it's installed with your plumbing inside any commercial kitchen. It is plumbed separately from your sanitary sewer, and by that I mean it's plumbed separately from all the toilets and the bathrooms. So it has its own independent plumbing, and its primary purpose is to prevent or trap, where it gets its name, grease from entering into the municipal sewer line.
Okay.
I'm sorry, there's a little bit of a delay here, so we may talk over each other a little bit.
Okay.
It also traps food particles and really anything that goes down the drain. It's to prevent it from going down further down into the sewer line or the municipal sewer line.
Now, Pat, can you tell me, why does that matter to have a grease trap in your food service operations? Can you even operate without one? Can you?
Well, a lot of people try. The answer to your question is kind of multi-answered, I would say, and that's that number one is it's required by law. Any commercial kitchen in Georgia is required to have a grease trap installed in their system. It's regulated by local municipalities, whether that is the county or sometimes a smaller city government. So they regulate these things, and the reason they regulate these things is ultimately because the EPD, which is the regulatory arm of the EPA out of Washington, they will fine cities and counties for every sanitary sewer overflow that they may have. Grease is the number one reason why drains all over the sewer system. Sometimes you'll see them in Atlanta, you'll see them bubbling up down the middle of the street. Grease is the number one reason that we have these overflows. And the reason the overflows are such a problem is because when that happens, all of the sewage is flowing into our streams and our rivers and our lakes, and it's affecting all the wildlife. So it's a huge environmental problem. In addition to that, as grease enters the sewer system, it makes its way to the treatment plants where all of our wastewater is processed and treated. It can gum up the works. It can really cause problems with pumps with filters and everything that goes into treating our drinking water, it can really cause millions of dollars of damage to these plants. So the
Oh,
EPD is really strict. Ultimately, that's why the local counties or cities, they impose their own fines on restaurant operators that don't fall in compliance. That's the main reason, is it's going to hit you in the pocketbook. But ultimately, the other reasons would be because if you have grease problems in your restaurant, if you're not servicing your grease trap, you can have backups in your kitchen. You can have backups in your restaurant. You can have a failure of the grease trap, and suddenly you've got all this nasty water in your parking lot. So it doesn't bode well for your customers to see that type of thing. So there's a variety of reasons. All of them are bad if you don't maintain your grease trap and if you don't have a grease trap. So it's in everybody's best interest to have one and to manage it properly.
so basically, you're saying that grease traps are regulated. Now, I will come clean here and say that I've been in the industry for a number of years. And last year, I actually was working with a restaurant that was having a grease trap problem, and we called you. And what was going on is it smelled terrible. In addition to, and I think the restaurant had been in service for over a year and a half, and they'd never cleaned the grease trap. And it was a mess because and I want to stay on topic here, but I just remember that when the initial call came to get a referral from me, they wanted somebody out there that day. Well, the issue was it was extremely costly and no one could come that day because they were already working on pre-scheduled cleanings. And I just wanted to throw that out there. When should a food service operator or restaurant owner start thinking about grease traps? Is it before they sign their lease? Is it when they're getting their plans done with the city?
Yeah, great question. And the answer is both of those. When you're planning your restaurant, if you're doing a design build for a build out of an existing space, most of the time, if it's in a shopping center, for example, there will usually be an existing grease trap in place. If you're doing a ground up build, then your whoever's handling your plans, usually they'll know, the engineers will know that a grease trap should be part of that puzzle. But you should be thinking about your grease trap way before you're opening your doors. And in most cases, you're going to be required to have a grease trap and to have a contract in place with somebody before you're ever going to be able to even get your certificate of occupancy. So early on, it's part of the process. It's part of your project management team's responsibility. Whoever it is that's putting your restaurant together, it should be on their to-do list.
So before someone gets their certificate of occupancy, so what you're really saying is this is just a part of the design of the restaurant. Now, here's a question. Can a plumber not just handle, I've got a great, I've had restaurants say to me, I've got a great plumber. Why do I need to bear an additional expense and call another company to come and clean out the grease?
It's a great question. The short answer is most plumbers can pump out a grease trap. Anybody with a pump truck could pump out a grease trap. But in Georgia and in most states, you have to be registered and a licensed grease trap hauler, certified by the state in order to pump a grease trap. Most plumbers, either if they're not certified or registered with the state, they'll call somebody like Apex, our company, to come out and at least do that portion of the work for them. A plumber is, by nature, their whole business model is they're waiting for your phone call. You call a plumber when there's a problem, usually very reactive and not proactively, and they will charge you from the time they leave their shop to the time they get to your restaurant. And then usually when when they're finished their job, you'll get a bill that's astronomical. Plumbers are very, very expensive, and they're better served doing plumbing, turning wrenches, as I call it, putting things together, doing what they're licensed and what they specialize in. Grease traps generally is not in that genre. So a grease trap company that is a scheduled maintenance company is going to be much more affordable and equipped to do the job, just that job. That's what we specialize in.
So here's the thing. I'm veering off because I do have questions that have, been pre-asked by restaurateurs, but the grease, the grease that's coming out of my restaurant, is it really just trash? Is it reusable, or is it just that I should be concerned about not having it go into the sewer system?
Okay, that's also a great question, and it used to be as early as 10 years ago, it was all trash. A company like ours would come out, and we would pump out the grease trap, and we would haul it away, hopefully taking it to a proper disposal place. But back in those days, it could have wound up in the next guy's grease trap, pumped back in.
Oh, wow.
But it was mostly trash, mostly water. Now with new technology, that grease that is removed, and understand, most of grease trap waste, 90% of it is water. The remaining 10% is a mixture of grease and trash and anything that floated down the drain, lemon peels, napkin rings. So the grease that is captured, that small percentage, through processes, modern day processes, can actually be used to create biodegradable and green energy. Biodiesel is a product that it burns clean. It can replace diesel fuel. Our company, in partnership with another company that collects cooking oil, together we create biodiesel.
Oh, wow.
And biodiesel is used, yes ma'am, biodiesel is used in a wide variety of different applications. There's also new technology with oils and grease and fats that is in the development of biodegradable plastic straws that will actually degrade within 30 days. So there's a lot of new technology coming out which will actually reuse the grease trap waste or the grease and prevent it from ending up in a landfill somewhere. So it is an exciting time with industry and with all the new technologies coming available.
Another question I have from a restaurateur is, I've been up for 1.5 years. I've never done anything with the grease trap. I'm a little bit concerned, am I going to face, I don't know what to do at this point because we haven't been doing it. What's your advice to me? Because now that I know, I want to do the right thing, but I don't really want to get in trouble. Can you help?
Okay. Well, the first thing I would probably say if you were a friend of mine is that you're an idiot.
No, Pat.
Because there are so many things that can go wrong.
Okay.
Grease, like anything that is sticky, over time, grease will collect. Grease will collect not only in the grease trap, it'll collect in the lines that bring the water into the grease trap. So it's a problem that really affects not only the grease trap, but the different working parts of your plumbing system. So that's one issue. The other issue is, it blows my mind, and it does happen, that folks get away with this because there's inspectors. There are compliance inspectors in most all municipalities that will come by at random without notice, knock on your door, and they'll demand to see proof that you have had your grease trap serviced on the prescribed frequency.
With that, so if you're saying, because I personally know that there are 159 different municipalities in the great state of Georgia, and I know that because of some place I used to work, right? And what I'm saying to you, let's talk about this maintenance schedule. are different municipalities requiring different things, or is it just across the board? So I call Apex Environmental Services, or I call you and I say, hey, Pat, can you come out? How often can I expect for you to come out to my restaurant? Do I need to shut down? Tell me what that's like.
Okay. You know, it's a difficult thing because unfortunately the requirements do vary from municipality to municipality. Uh, it's getting better. There's becoming more of a focus and an awareness, and as that occurs, we're seeing more uniformity. But some rural areas will require you to have your grease trap pumped, twice a year. Most all municipalities will require you to have your grease trap serviced at a minimum quarterly, every 90 days.
Okay.
Now, you should also understand it really depends on a couple things. One, what type of food do you produce? If it's
Okay.
really a hamburger place that generates a lot of fat, oils, and grease, you're going to have to at least go quarterly on that. In some cases, you may have to go more often, depending on the inspector that is assigned to you. If they come out and they look at the grease trap and they see that there's an abundance or just a whole bunch of grease in that grease trap, they may make you go every 2 months. They may make you go monthly. It really is up to the inspector that's looking at the grease trap. The other thing to consider is the size of your grease trap in relation to what you do. Grease traps range in sizes. There's essentially two different kinds. You have the small little boxy grease traps that sit inside a restaurant. They may be on the floor. They may be inside the floor, usually next to a sink. Those are very small and they don't trap a lot of grease, so they get full quickly. Somebody like that, City of Atlanta has a whole bunch of them because space is limited and they can't put them outdoors, so they have these smaller devices. And those have to be cleaned in Atlanta a minimum every 14 days.
Oh, wow. 14 days?
Every 14 days, yep. The other end of the spectrum are the outside or exterior grease traps, which most people have. Those are the big grease traps that are buried underground. They're similar in their appearance to maybe a septic tank. They're big reinforced concrete tanks. You'll see a couple manhole covers. Sometimes they'll have several of these plumbed together in a shopping center. Many times 4 or 5 restaurants will share a system, and that may have 3, 4, 5 grease traps lined up in a row because they take all the waste for that shopping center. So it really depends. It's on a case-by-case basis, but that's kind of how they operate. And as we get further down the road here, you'll see more and more, I guess, uniformity in the codes.
What's interesting to me is because I did shut down a few restaurants in or during COVID, and those spaces have been repurchased and some spaces are sitting idle, which means that grease probably in some spaces has not been addressed. Or am I thinking about that wrong?
No,
You know what I'm saying?
You're right. Grease over time, while it is sticky and it is gross, and when we think of grease, we think of Crisco or something oily. Over time, grease will harden like concrete. And that really is the problem with some of these sewer lines, is because if they're not cleaned on a regular basis, if they're allowed to accumulate, you can have a real problem if this stuff hardens like concrete, and then along comes a tenant, moves into this space, and the grease trap may not have been serviced in 2 years, 3 years. They open up the lids, and you've got a solid grease trap filled with solid grease that's like concrete, and there's no other choice but to replace the entire grease trap at a cost of about $15,000 to $20,000.
That, and I'm just sitting here because I think about 25 to 30% of restaurants closed down during COVID. We've got a lot of new operators coming in on the ground, utilizing PP money to get started, but this is their first rodeo. So that's just an interesting thing I wanted to point out. And the other thing, so let's kind of get into costs. I think you kind of made it clear that sometimes in the city of Atlanta, if it's a smaller trap that's inside, it might need to be serviced every 14 days. However, if typically, I think you said about once a quarter, every 90 days would be what somebody should expect. What is the typical cost of that? You have any insight there?
Yep. It's going to vary from restaurant to restaurant. I wish it was a uniform price, but here's what happens. Let's say you have a standard 1,500 gallon grease trap. That's pretty standard in our industry to find those. You'll see those pretty commonly. So let's say somebody calls me up and wants a quote, and they tell me over the phone, I've got a 1,500 gallon grease trap. How much? Well, until I go out there or somebody from our office goes out to actually physically look at that grease trap, it's difficult to give you a firm price.
I get it.
I can give you an estimate, but it's not going to be a firm price until we see it. And the reason is, suddenly we find out that your 1,500 gallon grease trap is in a parking deck where our trucks can't. There's a clearance issue. We can't get our trucks in there. Or maybe the grease trap is 150 feet from the restaurant in the middle of a field. Well, suddenly we have a situation where we need 2 men on that job and a whole bunch of hose to reach it. So like anything that is a physically performed job, you're going to have to look at these things in the field in a real world situation.
Okay. We have a question from Simone. She says grease interceptors every 14 days. That's interesting. We had one in, I don't know what FI is, Simone, but it was 50 gallons. We cleaned ours monthly. Florida, okay, it's not FI, that's FL. In Florida, it was 50 gallons. We cleaned ours monthly or quarterly, depending on how many events busy we were. So 14 days is interesting. I had never heard that either, what Pat was sharing with me. And I have just met so many operators that I would have a tendency to think that some people, if it's that tiny, that they could clean it themselves, but interesting to say the least. Another question is, does the health department regulate this? I think you've addressed this, Pat, but so like is this a part of sanitation, if you will, or is this a totally separate thing, you know? And maybe you've addressed this, but I'd like to, since the question came up again.
Okay, sure. It really depends. In some places, maybe a small town, my mind goes to Cartersville, Georgia, for example, north of Atlanta. Not a tiny town by any stretch, but smaller than some of the larger cities. That the health department may reign over that. In larger municipalities, Gwinnett County, Forsyth County, Cherokee County, all of those, they have their own departments. They have their own wastewater pre-treatment coordinators. And that's a division of their government that is strictly in charge of wastewater. That's a wide, that storm drain, storm sewer, grease traps, all of that falls under wastewater. So the larger the municipality, most of them are going to have a designated branch that will handle that. The smaller towns may very well let the health department handle it.
So basically what I'm hearing and is that this is really municipality by municipality, restaurant by restaurant, to determine what you need, the condition of the grease trap, how often you should get it maintained, how much it's going to cost. Another question is this my landlord's responsibility to maintain this?
Sometimes it is. And I'll tell you, from our perspective, that's a good thing.
That's a good day.
If
Okay.
the landlord, that's a good thing from our perspective, because if the landlord is responsible for the grease trap as an asset and protection of their asset, they're more likely to remain compliant. They're more likely to compel their tenants to follow the rules. The restaurant industry, as everybody here knows, operate on a very thin margin. So when push comes to shove, you have to prioritize your dollars. And a lot of folks, who would blame them, they may decide that the place that they're going to cut in their budget might be at the grease trap. And I can certainly understand that. Money is tight, especially in this business. But what a lot of people don't understand is that you're almost creating a bigger cost issue for yourself when you do that, because again, if you're not regularly maintaining these systems, many things can go wrong that will cost you, tenfold the cost of a simple grease trap pumping service. But getting back to your question, yes, in some cases the landlords take care of that. In other cases, it is truly down to the restaurant. Ultimately, by law, the generator of the grease, the person that creates the grease, is responsible for the grease from cradle to grave. That means from the time the grease is created or generated to the final resting spot at the disposal plant. Ultimately, by law, it is up to that operator to make certain that the grease is managed professionally and properly.
And can I be shut down over my grease trap by these regulating authorities?
Yes. The short answer is yes. Most will give you a warning. And then if you don't adhere to the warning, they will give you a citation, a fine. And beyond that point, if you're still not compliant, then ultimately they have the power to shut your restaurant down. Similar to like a health inspection, if you don't pass a health inspection, 2 times, 3 times, they're going to close you down and they're going to bring your attention to it.
This is all I hear is money. Cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. That's all I hear.
Yep. Well, and again, it's all about compliance. And the reason they want you to be compliant is because of the infrastructure. I think it was Simone that was asking about the frequency in Atlanta, how often it was every 2 weeks. The reason is if you know anything about the city of Atlanta and their infrastructure, they got some real problems. They have a lot of old pipes that burst all the time. So they really are sticklers and they really pay close attention to grease.
Okay. Well, this was a 30-minute conversation about grease traps, just getting some down and dirty information on them, because clearly I just put your information in the chat. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to put those questions in the chat and we will get those addressed. Also, it looks like we have a few more people than 1 or 2 more than we had expected today. So if everyone could also kind of put your email addresses in, because I'd like to send you this video. So do we have any questions at this time about grease traps that we have not addressed or have not covered, or anything kind of specific to your operations? Because Pat will follow up. We don't want to get the good, bad, and ugly out in front of everybody, but Pat will definitely follow up with you or myself to get your questions answered. Jordan, I see I have yours from Red Door Events. And then Pat, to kind of, and people please ask questions if you have any, but to kind of wrap this up, I'm going back to something you said earlier about keeping the documentation on site. How far back should I go with that documentation? Is that just a year, maybe? You know what I'm saying?
Generally, you're going to want to keep 3 years. 3 years, let me back up a little bit. For those that don't know, part of grease trap service when the service has been completed, a document is given to the restaurant manager or owner or whoever's on site. It's called a manifest, and that outlines what was done with the grease trap, how much waste was removed. Ultimately, it has our information on it. It has the information of where the grease is going to be disposed, and it has the operator's information as far as the generator, I should say, the restaurant owner. That's a document. It's a legal document, and you need to keep that on the premises for 3 years. That is your proof to the inspector that you're compliant.
Proof of compliancy. And so here are the tips or the takeaways. And Pat, please, if I'm missing any. Number one, you should be thinking about a grease trap and how you're going to get maintained and which company you're going to be using. You can see that I put Pat's information with Apex Environmental Services so that you guys can reach out to him if you need any help with that. But one of the things is to schedule maintenance because you're going to need it regularly. The second thing is this is something that you should come out of the gate doing, thinking about, preparing for, setting aside operating costs to deal with. And you need to keep documentation on site for at least 3 years. Pat, do you have anything else to add?
No, that about is the gist of the grease trap industry. I will say that getting a lot of municipalities will require you to have a contract or proof that you've signed up with somebody. If you need help navigating all of the ordinances and questions, any grease trap service provider worth their weight will be more than happy to meet with you to look at your grease trap, open it up, walk you through how they work, take a look at any potential pitfalls you might have. We're here to help you guys. That's our job. I mean, obviously we're a business, but ultimately we're here to serve the restaurant owners. Without you all, we don't exist. So all of us in the industry are always happy to come out and meet with you and chat with you about your grease trap.
All right, everybody. This has been an education session with the Georgia Hospitality and Food Service Network. This is Grease Trap 101 with Pat Agnew from Apex Environmental. This is a last call for questions. All right. Going once. I'm going to wait a second. Pat, thank you so much. I've had over the years so many questions about grease traps. We will be sharing the recording of this session with you and with the participants. So that's all we have for today, folks. I would like to tell everybody that we do have a session coming up next week called Restaurant Business Literacy with a restaurant consultant, about 30 years of experience, just going over, especially if you're a new operator, some good stuff. If you've been in business for a while and maybe you just need a refresher course on some of those things that you haven't taken a look at in years, please join us next Tuesday. And you can visit www.gahfn.com to sign up for that class. And with that, until next time, thank you, Pat, and thank you everyone for participating.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Bray Sloan, could you put your contact information into, thank you guys for saying that people are chiming in, this was helpful. Thank you, that is the point. We want to help you guys be the best operators that you can be. Jordan, I have yours, but Bray, if you could put your contact in the chat. And with that, we are going to sign off, okay? Bye-bye.